We're back with a continuation of how to construct a snail pen, and today we are continuing with the greenhouse. In our subsequent video, remember we stopped at the greenhouse, so we are continuing from there today, and hopefully we're going to round up with the construction methods today, and proceed to something else in our next video. Now, the greenhouse system is the system that allows you to do a lot of things without necessarily stressing yourself that much. Now, for commercial production, we said having the concrete pen and the greenhouse system is best. You can manage them together. That is the best pattern. How do they work? Is the greenhouse is used as a grow out operation, while the concrete pen is used as a breeding operation. So the mature snails are introduced into the concrete pens. Then when they begin to lay their eggs and the eggs hatch the baby snails are moved into the greenhouse, where they tend to grow faster because of the natural vegetation and the additional supplementary feed we give to the snails in the greenhouse. So, but we've talked about the concrete pen, lots about the concrete pen. Today we want to dwell on the greenhouse. Now, you can also have your mature breeding snails in the greenhouse. It's not compulsory you must have them in the concrete, from concrete to greenhouse. Now, if you want to have your breeding stock in the greenhouse, you must ensure that the greenhouse is well established before you bring in your parent stock. And you must bring a very few number of parent stock so that you don't overpopulate the greenhouse and you don't disrupt the growth of the vegetation. If you have loads of snails into the greenhouse at once, the vegetation will suffer because the snails will ravage it. Now, the optimum stocking density for an 8 meters by 30 meters greenhouse is 2,000 breeding snails, assuming you want to use the greenhouse to grow both the breeders and the offspring that will be coming out. So we're going to talk in detail about the greenhouse, but first of all, let's look at how it is being constructed. Now, the construction of the greenhouse starts with the block work. You lay the block, the foundation work, just like what we do on the concrete pen. If you've seen the video for the concrete pen construction, how we do the perimeter work, it's the same thing we do with the greenhouse. You lay 4 coaches of block, 2 coaches has to go under the ground, and 2 coaches will be afloat the ground, that is on top the surface. So the reason why we're doing 2 coaches down is to ward off rodents that burrow under the earth, in order not for them to burrow through and affect the snails inside the greenhouse. So you need to have at least 2 coaches of blocks sinking deep into the earth so that it will not permit rodents and other soil pests from having access into the greenhouse area. Then the 2 coaches above the ground, as you can see on the screen, are where we'll put our pipes. We introduce the galvanized pipes that will form the dome of the greenhouse. So you can see the dome of the greenhouse that has not been covered. This is what it looks like. The pipe will go inside, will go inside the block, then we'll cast it very well inside the block so that when there is a very high wind, it will not pull off the greenhouse. So everywhere we have pipe is casted with concrete so that the pipes will remain strong despite the wind and any adverse climatic condition that it comes in contact with. Now, after that is done, then we do the covering. The covering, the side is insect net. It is 90% insect nets. Almost the tiniest of insects may not penetrate into this building, but it allows ample amounts of ventilation for the animals to thrive within the greenhouse. Then the top of it, we have a shaded net that is 75% shading. This type of net is best for greenhouse because you need enough sunlight to penetrate the greenhouse in order for the vegetation to grow, for photosynthesis to take place. Now, if you use 80%, 90%, 100% shade net, the vegetation will not be well established because the shading is too much. Sunlight cannot penetrate adequately, and therefore photosynthesis is slowed down. So as a result of that, we use 70 to 75% shaded net, and the side is 70% to 90% insect netting that allows ample amounts of ventilation into the structure. So once this is done and covered, you have to now plaster the walls of the greenhouse, the inside walls. Remember what we said on the concrete pen, that if you don't plaster the internal wall properly, the snails will eat into the walls and damage the walls because of the calcium carbonate they are looking for in that cement that is used to build that concrete. So as a result of that, after building the wall for the greenhouse, you don't plaster it, you wait for the installation to be done. The installation is the pipes, the net, and all that comes with it. Now once that is done and it is sealed completely, that is when you plaster the internal wall so that you don't disrupt the work anymore. So you plaster the internal wall and also the block holes. Preferably you use 6 inches hollow blocks, those blocks that have hole at the middle, because it makes it easier for us to put the pipes and cast it. But if you use the solid block, you have to crack open spaces within the block wall to put the pipe and cast with woods. But with the hollow blocks, you can just put it inside the block and you have your bars, the rods, to hold it firm and cast it in there. So once the casting is done and the greenhouse is being installed, covered, and everything completely done, that is when you begin to plaster the walls of the internal part of the greenhouse and also fill those block holes and plaster it smoothly, as you can see on the screen. So this is how the greenhouse is built. Now once this is completely done, you still have to build that water trench that we usually build for the concrete pens. So you build the water trench around the greenhouse to ward off predators from coming from outside to infest your snails in the greenhouse. Then once this water trench is built and water is poured in with disinfectant, we'll now spray chemicals on the inside the greenhouse. So once the installation is done, the ground is properly cleared, the debris taken out, we stomp the ground, take out the roots and all the leftover of roots from the vegetation that was taken off from the greenhouse area. Then we'll begin to till the soil for cultivation. You till the old soil, is either you make ridges out of it or you make a bed, a complete bed. You loosen the soil in every area and make it like a bed. Now once that is done, you spray pest control chemicals for against soil pests like ants, insects, termites, whatever that is in that soil that is going to be harmful to snails. We spray a soil pest chemical, preferably something that has cypermethrin, like what you're seeing on the screen. That chemical is preferable because it is very effective. So you use it and spray the entire area. After spraying the area, then we fertilize the fertilize the soil with organic fertilizer, not inorganic fertilizer. We use either rabbit urine or you use droppings from rabbits, from poultry, from pigs, from cattle to fertilize the soil. Then we plant the crops or plants that are meant for food for the snails inside the greenhouse. Now the crops to grow, we'll talk about those when we go to feeds and feeding stuff that are required, the vegetation for the snails. Basically what you need are sweet potato, creeping crops that creep, that covers the surface of the soil. Sweet potato, the vines, you plant cocoyam, you plant water leaf, you plant dwarf banana that will also provide additional shade. If you go to the villages when we used to be very small and we look for snails around, you figure out that when you go to a plantain leaf, the dry ones, the prunings of the plantain, Once you shake them, you see snails falling off. So snails like to hide under the prunings of those things, and they take shade from them during the day. So that is why we always encourage the cultivation of dwarf banana. Why dwarf banana? Because we don't want it to grow as tall as the greenhouse, unlike the plantain that grows quite tall. If it's too tall, it will get to the roof of the greenhouse, and that is not good for the greenhouse. So that is why we prefer the dwarf species of the banana. So they don't grow very tall, but they can be very big, and the prunings, the snails can find shade under them. And of course, when they begin to fruit, you can also harvest the fruit for yourself, personal consumption. That is if the snails have not helped you to begin to consume them before you notice it. All right, so those are the plants that are required inside the greenhouse for the snails. Then once that is cultivated, you have the sprinklers above. You can see on the screen the sprinklers are installed above the greenhouse. So when you on the sprinklers, they begin to shower like it is raining. So this makes the ground to grow very fast, and also makes the environment very cool for the snails when they are eventually introduced into the greenhouse. So usually we wet the greenhouse morning and evening. 10 minutes in the morning you on the sprinklers, and 10 minutes in the evening you on the sprinklers. So this will help to keep the greenhouse very cool almost all year round. That is why estivation cannot take place in the greenhouse. We talked about estivation in one of our previous videos. So if you have not seen it, please subscribe and check that video. And for those of us that are participating in the training, please do well to check again on that video for estivation. Now, because of this sprinkling of water, the estivation cycle that usually occurs in the wild is broken, because it is almost rainy season all year round inside the greenhouse. So that is how the greenhouse is built, and that's how it is being managed. Now, you don't need to walk on the floor of the greenhouse when it is fully installed and the vegetation is cultivated. So there is a walking platform at the middle. Preferably, some people sometimes we use blocks, sometimes we use a slab, sometimes we use wooden bridge. So preferably the wooden bridge, because the bridge is elevated from the ground. Snails can also find shade under the bridge while you walk on top. So you can see from the screen that the bridge is straight at the middle. So anybody going into the greenhouse has to walk on top this bridge. So you don't walk on the floor of the greenhouse, because in doing so you might damage some of the snails that you may not see on the floor of the greenhouse. So it is best to have the walkway from the door to the other extreme end, a straight path in the middle. Then we also have the feeders or feeding rack in the greenhouse. This picture on the screen is what the feeding rack looks like, and you can see them inside the greenhouse. So the snails take shade under the feeding rack during the daytime. Some of them bury themselves in the soil. Some find shade or shelter under the leaves, some under the banana leaves, and some under this feeding rack. So you can see the raised feeding rack. You can see the young snails under the feeding rack. So that is where they stay during the daytime. And in the night, after watering the greenhouse for 10 minutes in the evening, we put food on top this feeding rack, as you can see. Then the snails will come on top it to feed at night. So it serves as both feeder and shade for the snails. Feeder in the night, and during the day it serves as shade for the snails. So these are the items that makes up the greenhouse. And of course, the net on top we said is 70 to 75% shade net. So the heat of the sun is taken care of. If you go under the greenhouse on a day that is very sunny, you will not feel the effect of the sun or the impact of the sun, because it is almost cool under the greenhouse. So this is how the greenhouse is being constructed, and it is good for especially civil servants and people who are too busy for themselves, that cannot handle a concrete pen system where you have to go and feed the snails, carry out a whole lot of activities like sorting for eggs and incubating the eggs and all of those troubles. In the greenhouse, you don't have those troubles. All you do is on the sprinklers, wet the place, and lock it up, and that's it. What the snails will feed on is already in the greenhouse, except when you have time to introduce supplementary feed on those feeding racks. After watering the greenhouse, you place the feed on top the feeding racks and you're done. You just move along till the next day again. One person can manage as much as 5 to 10 greenhouses because all he or she is doing is on the sprinklers, they automatically water the greenhouse, off them back. Just go there and spray the feed on the feeding racks and you're done for the day. So it is less labor intensive, it is less demanding. So when you bring in the parent stock into the greenhouse, they will remain there, they lay their eggs. Of course, the snails incubate their eggs themselves in the wild. Nobody goes into the forest to incubate it for them. While we are taking out the eggs from the concrete pen to incubate them on the incubator pens. I've explained that in another video, so please check out our videos. Now, the reason we're doing that also is because we want the hatching percent to be higher, because when you prepare the incubator pen yourself and incubate the eggs, there is a higher percentage hatchability. But that is not to say that the eggs will not hatch at all wherever the snails have incubated them, because in the wild the snails incubate the eggs themselves and they hatch out very well. So likewise, in the greenhouse, if you introduce the parent stocks into the greenhouse, the snails will lay their eggs, incubate them in the earth under the soil, and the eggs will hatch and come out. The young snails or hatchlings will sprung up from the earth and continue their life's journey. As you know, they are oviparous animals. We have both viviparous and oviparous. Viviparous animals are animals that give birth to their young alive, while oviparous animals like reptiles and snails, mollusks, animals that lay eggs and the eggs will hatch out. So there is no form of a child and parent relationship in this case. The snail will not hatch the eggs and begin to carry the young ones and move along. No. From the minute the offspring hatch out, they are on their own. They begin to fend for themselves. So there's no mother and child relationship there. So once they incubate them on the earth, they move along. They will hatch when it's due 21 days, and they spring up from the earth. As they spring up, they begin to feed and mature and grow on their own. So that's the interesting part of the greenhouse. So for you that is quite busy, busy man, civil servant, a doctor, an engineer, anybody can run a greenhouse snail farm because it is not demanding and the production is just like in the wild. It's very, very good. So that is how the greenhouse is being run. So all you need to do is on the sprinklers. If during the rainy season, you almost don't need the sprinklers because water is permitted into the greenhouse, but very little of it because the shade net is so fine, the holes are so fine that it doesn't permit the whole rainwater in. It takes half of it down and part of it comes in. So there will not be a case of overflooding with this type of mesh we use. It's because of the rain we used to use a tarpaulin, a UV treated tarpaulin before the net, but we figure out this type of net that doesn't permit enough rain into the greenhouse. So that's why we removed the tarpaulin. So you don't have to be afraid of your greenhouse being flooded when you're using the type of greenhouse mesh we use. All right, so that takes care of the greenhouse. We hope we have explained it to your understanding. Then we want to look quickly at the movable pen. This is almost the last type of pen we'll be talking about. The movable pen, they are constructed with nets. You can see it there on the screen. It's quite unique and beautiful as well. It has sprinklers inside. So we have it in 3 steps. You can see the door or the opening is at the front. so it's easy for you to even have access to it and tend to it. And like we said, it's not good for the width of the pen to be too much, because your hand needs to get inside and access every area of it. So why we call it the movable pen is because you can carry it along. You can dismantle it and move it from one location to the other. As you can see, it is in 3 steps, and underneath every step there is a water collector that takes the water out, so the water doesn't drip from one step to the other step. Though this is quite expensive, you need a fabricator to fabricate this and prepare it for you, but all these materials have become very expensive, so it is capital intensive. Sometimes I say people just get this for an aesthetic purpose, just to have a beautiful farm by the side. Otherwise, I don't personally see the economic value of having this type of movable pen. Instead, I would prefer you do the wooden boxes, because this is really capital intensive. As small as it looks, it's almost 500,000 naira as you're seeing it on the screen. So instead of having this as a snail farm, it's better you have this. If you have the funds, you have it to secure snails you want to use for consumption. So sometimes some people use it for experimental purpose, some use it just to keep snails for household use. So these are movable pens. You can connect it to the borehole system of your house. You can see there are sprinklers inside. So in each of the steps, you have one sprinkler. So once you on the regulator by the side, the regulator is by the side. So once you on it, you see that the sprinkler will begin to rotate, and all the snails in there will be adequately moisturized, and they will thrive perfectly well. So this is what the movable pen is like. It's the best we can describe it to you, because it's been fabricated with galvanized pipes. Then a net is also being used to wrap it round, with also the chicken mesh that we use in some of our poultry houses to ward off reptiles from damaging the netting material. So this is what we call the movable pen. And then we also have some really ancient systems, like another type of shade low fence pen, where you can see on the screen a net is used around the environment, and dwarf banana is planted within the enclosure, and snails are just dumped in there at will. This is not really hygienic, but for home use and in rural communities, they use this method to rear snails. But I'm not sure any one of us here want to use something like this. Although the snails are secured, because the net is also flapped inwards and snails cannot escape from it. Now, if you look at the roof of that building, you will see the roof is made up of the dwarf banana leaves. It's really looking like a solid roof. You may want to wonder if sun will even penetrate to the floor of this apartment, or if a direct rainfall will affect the snails, because even the rain that falls will have to fall on the leaves of the dwarf banana and drizzle down to the floor. So it's quite a unique system of rearing snails as well. So this is another small scale semi-intensive system that is used to rear snails. So there are also other systems, like the ones we have in the backyard. You can see this one is built around the backyard of the farm owner or the house owner. You just use the wall of your house and add additional block by the external part and demarcate it into pens and have coverings. So you can see you can build something like this around your structure, your house, your living house. You can also build something like this on the fence of your apartment, of your compound. So you can see these are all different small older systems, and you can have all of them round your apartment. So it's just for you to have a roof over it, like the one that is built around the apartment. You have just the roof of the house is also taking care of that, so you don't need to build additional roof for that. But the one that is built on the fence, you have to stretch maybe one length of zinc above so that it takes care of direct rain falling into it. So you can see how it is built, attached to the accommodation of the owner of the house, and also attached to the wall of the owner of the house. So these are all small scale systems that you can practice and start with, then make up your mind to go into one of those commercial production systems that will also afford you time to do other things and also use it as a real profit generating business. So yeah, this is where we are going to call it a day for the construction of a snail pen. I'm sure we have done justice to this topic. You've seen the different systems of construction and what they look like, how we build them. So we think we have done enough justice to it. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask your questions, and we'll be more than happy to respond accordingly. Until then, thank you. I hope you've had another wonderful week of this training. God bless you, and bye bye.